Listen, I'm a massive Bob Dylan fan. He is my guy. But this song, in my opinion, has to be the greatest protest song in the history of the genre. August 2nd, 1964, American involvement in the war in Vietnam was about to take a turn for the worse. It was around 3 p.m. when the American warship on patrol in the Gulf of Tonkin, situated in the South of China Sea, was attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats from the country's navy. President Lyndon Johnson was informed of the attack, but he decided not to react publicly. 2 days later, a second attack was reported, and this time, the president reacted. Johnson responded with airstrikes and pushed the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, passed by Congress days later, which gave him sweeping authority to escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam, though this incident would later be widely disputed as either a misinterpretation or a fabrication. And young Americans were horrified when the Army started drafting up to 17,000 young men per month as the war went on. In 1965, this number would rise to 35,000. Phil Ochs was born in Texas in 1940. His father was a talented doctor who treated patients in a field hospital in the Second World War, causing lifelong depression and mental health issues. Phil briefly attended a military academy during high school, an experience that would later influence his anti-authoritarian views. Out of high school, he decided to be a journalist or a writer, and he met a friend at university who introduced him to folk music and taught him to play guitar. By this point, Phil was already very into politics, so hearing songs by Pete Seeger, Woody Guthrie, he knew this was where he belonged, and he headed to Greenwich Village. His thoughtful, blunt protest songs took the village by storm. He was an activist through and through. He came to describe himself as a singing journalist, a topical songwriter, and in 1964 he was planning the development of his second album, and he was getting more and more involved with the growing protests against American involvement in the war. As a response to Johnson's decision to escalate the conflict, Phil wrote I Ain't Marching Anymore. It's the story of the history of America and war through the eyes of a symbolic soldier who's called up to every conflict since the War of 1812. He's tired and he's desperate, and in the chorus he boldly states that he's not doing it anymore. And it's stunning because it's representative of every young person who was ever called up to fight for a cause that meant nothing to them. Every lyric is haunting. I Ain't Marching Anymore would become Phil Ochs' signature song, and he played it live regularly for the rest of his sadly short career. He also never stopped protesting. He was part of the formation of the Yippie movement in 1968 and testified in defense of the Chicago 7 after the Democratic Convention riots. On the stand, he recited lyrics from I Ain't Marching Anymore. The song didn't chart. It definitely wasn't your common definition of a hit, but it would become iconic in the anti-war movement, covered by a long list of famous folk singers. And Phil Ochs, though he led a life of struggle and tragedy until his untimely death at just 35 years old, would leave a lasting imprint on the zeitgeist of America.